President Biden remains defiant amid calls for him to drop out of the presidential race after his shaky performance at last week's debate. A slew of op-eds from some of the nation's largest newspapers have called on him to leave the race. The New York Times editorial board writing, quote, "The greatest public service Mr. Biden can now perform is to announce that he will not continue to run for re-election." But the president sought to appear more energized over the weekend at multiple rallies, and according to his re-election campaign, he raised more than $33 million following the debate. Still, voters are unsure. A recent CBS News poll finds 72% of voters do not think that President Biden has the mental and cognitive health to hold office. You can see that that's greater than just a few days ago, earlier in June. CBS News senior White House correspondent Weijia Jiang is following the latest fallout from Washington. So, Weijia, how is the Biden campaign responding to all of this?
Well, the campaign is saying that the polls are simply wrong and trying to brush them off, trying to turn the page and move forward. In fact, campaign aides tell CBS News that there are no plans to change the rhythm and the cadence of the campaign and the president's travel, and that he is going to be moving forward because they're really trying to stress to voters that there is absolutely no plan for the president to step down and make way for a different candidate. But as you point out, Lindsay, our CBS News poll, which was really the first one to gauge how voters reacted and how the debate impacted their thinking about the president, does not fare well for him because it shows that his their faith in him dropped significantly after his performance. And so, whether they can continue to toe this line and try to convince people that it was just a one-off has yet to be seen.
What is the president hearing from his family? How are they involved in his decision to remain in the race?
Well, the Biden family is incredibly close. So every time he makes a big decision, including back in 2019, whether he was going to run in 2020, he consults with several members of his family in a very intimate way. And they were all together at Camp David over the weekend, which is a presidential retreat. But we should note, Lindsay, that trip was already on the books. They had already planned to meet there. They were going to get photographs taken from a world-famous photographer, Annie Leibovitz. And the campaign is trying to say that, anyone who reads too much into that is not correct because they were going to meet no matter what. But we do know they had conversations, that this did come up, and his family's encouraging him to stay in the race. That includes his son, Hunter Biden. And so he will take that to heart because it was his family that ultimately persuaded him to run the first time around.
Weijia, I have less than a minute with you. What is the talk of what would happen if Democrats were to try and choose a new candidate? And also, do you think that that's not the right question because there's no situation in which that would be within the realm of possibility?
Well, the president has yet to be formally elected as the nominee, right? That's going to happen in August during the convention in Chicago. But it would not be easy, Lindsay, for that to happen if he himself doesn't step down. And that has to do with support of the delegates that they have already committed. It has to do with fundraising money that can't just be transferred. And there's also this, problem of who would replace the president. And I've talked to several Democrats who say the problem is that, they believe the vice president, Kamala Harris, would actually do even worse against Donald Trump than Biden. And they worry there would be a nightmare of a PR problem if the DNC tried to choose anyone other than Harris and, push out the first woman of color vice president to make room for probably a man.
Right.
And they don't think they'd be able to get around that. So there are a lot of, issues here, Lindsay, that does not make it easy. And they can't certainly just force Biden out, which is why others are saying that is why very prominent Democrats should be urging him to step down. But according to the White House and campaign aides, Lindsay, that is not going to happen.
Okay, Weijia Jiang, thank you.
Sure.